Welcome back. Those of you joining the video stream on your favorite podcast provider may be thinking you tuned into the wrong place. This is CTO Unfiltered. I have not switched to a sports talk format, but on the screen I do have a picture from a game recap. Yet another amazing three-point shot by Steph Curry. There's probably a million of them out there at this point. It was a question in a recent Harvard Business Review article, and I'll drop those links in the show notes. A CEO wrote to his team with a similar screenshot or video, and he asked, how do we get this level of performance out of a team? When you look at Steph Curry, one of the greatest players of all time, arguably in basketball, you see a phenomenal individual, a phenomenal team player, and it's not by accident. And the question becomes, what is the process? What is the system that has built this that allows him to be such a high performer? And then the question for CEOs, IOs, CTOs, any leader within an organization is, how do I scale this? How do I make this play out across my entire organization? As I've said before, for this podcast, technology is the context. It's not the content. We're going to dig into talent today. This is CTO Unfiltered. All right, welcome back. This week is a heavy talent conversation, building the systems that enable elite performance. And I think it's one that as we keep looking at the disruption that AI is bringing, the leverage that it's bringing us in terms of generating content, generating applications, generating things, the human in the loop becomes even more important. Now, they're not just working on the plumbing, working on some of the core things. They're now able to apply critical thinking and reasoning and their knowledge and experience to look at it and say, yeah, this is really good, or hey, this is 80% of the way there. It would be better if we added these security controls or improve the user experience or whatever. The human in the loop is going to be ever more important here. And we need to think about what's the systems in place? Where do we need those humans? And how do we elevate them to the next level? There were two Harvard Business Review pieces that came out in the month of March, but really they had one underlying thesis, and that is that, team performance and elite performance is a system design problem. And it's one that, as we're building organizations, as we're setting up teams, setting up departments, we really need to be thinking about the framework of instantiating those so that we're enabling that next level of performance. I led with a picture of Steph Curry. Clearly, all-star, elite athlete. We have this tendency, particularly in the American culture, I don't know about in other parts of the world, but we look at all-stars. We look at our rock stars. We compare and use those analogies when we talk about our teams. And I'm guilty of this, right? I sit back and think about some of the rock stars that I have across different teams that are contributing to outcomes on a daily basis. And sometimes that thinking is because of, really good outcomes that they produced, or how they looked at problems, or just how they approach their day to day. And that's what I want. Sometimes the rock stars that come to mind, it's because of heroics. It's because they go the extra mile. They're working at 1 a.m. because they woke up and they had a problem, and They had a new way of thinking about it. So they got their laptop out and they started coding. Heroics are good. They're needed, but they don't scale. You can't build large engineering organizations simply off of heroics. So how do you go about building teams that are high performing, that produce a talent pipeline that not only enable you to deliver today, but they set you up with those future leaders of tomorrow? So the first article is how to turn individual talent into organizational excellence. And it was by James Fulton and Todd Warner. It came out March 2026. And for me, the takeaway, there was 3 levers in there. And I've put a couple of them into place just as I've thought about my organization. And I see where other parts of it, they've already played out. I've got things in place that I feel really good about. But here's the framework. It comes down to 3 things. It comes down to talent, the team, and the routine. I led with Steph Curry. Steph Curry played Division I college basketball at Davidson. Davidson is not what you would consider to be a powerhouse basketball school. For those of you listening to this, you're not fans of basketball. I'm sorry, but it's an analogy that works. Within the college basketball community, your powerhouses are like Duke, North Carolina, Indiana, Michigan, UCLA. These are schools that have a storied history. They know how to scout and recruit, and not just recruit, but then build and retain that talent and produce championships. So that's part of their culture. They have routine within there. How are their practices organized? How do they execute their routines leading up to game day? How do they actually execute on game day? What we as fans see, we see that game day execution. We don't see all the routines with the strength trainers and the nutritionists and the psychological coaches, the ones who help with mindfulness routines and things like that. Sleep coaches. I mean, there's a coach for probably every biological activity you could think of that put a plan in place to develop that talent, to get individuals ready, and then to get them to perform as a team. And so that's within the routine lever of this framework. Within an engineering space, what are those high stakes moments where your standards are taught and they're actually reinforced? Several come to my mind. I have standards in terms of quality, standards in terms of performance. It boils down to a simple statement that I made years ago, which is don't ship crap. But what does that mean? It means that we're not putting code into production that has meaningful flaws to it. Code and experiences that introduce friction or abrasion to a customer who's trying to carry out a task. We don't want to put things in production that are not performant. Something that should take a second or two, if it's taking 5 to 10 seconds, I don't know that I want to ship that. I want to go back and look at it and tune it. And I want those moments that matter to come up even earlier in the cycle. I don't want to find them at the moment it's going to production. I want them to come up while the system is being coded, while you're in a sprint. And it could be at a pull request. It could be at one of the sprint demos or sprint reviews. That's where these things should really surface and be addressed and corrected. And when that carries out time and time again, earlier and earlier in the process, that standard gets enforced and that culture gets built and people understand what's expected of them, such that when they're actually in the construction phase or even earlier in the design phase, they're thinking about all of these elements and they're building something that's winning, and they're building something that will win with their team such that when it goes into production, people think about the meaningful impact that it had, not that it took 10 seconds for a screen to load. Handoffs, postmortems, incident retrospectives. These are the places where those standards are executed against. It means nothing if you write it on paper. It's got to be carried out in these moments. And guess what, my friends? AI can't do that, right? AI, as I talk about later, it'll argue with you, right? So it'll come back and say, oh no, but here's 5 things of why this is right. This is where those moments that matter, it's that human in the loop. It's the people with seasoning and experience and critical thinking and knowledge that bring that performance to bear. The second piece in that framework, it's the team. It's and I think the statement in the article was how the team works matters more than who leads it. And we could probably debate that a little bit. But I think it's largely right. I think the who that leads it, if that person has the right mindset, and there's a million books out there. There's servant leadership. There's How to Lead, Born to Lead. There's a lot of great books, a lot of great frameworks. I think you need to be an amalgamation of all those things. I think that there are times you need to be a servant leader. You need to be someone identifying the roadblocks, finding out where people are challenged, where they're being held back, and you need to lean in and help remove those roadblocks. I think there are other times where the roadblocks are organizational challenges, or they are friction between teams or friction between mandates. And that's where the leader has to be a leader and step in and make a decision. You can't always defer to the team. The team's not going to want to make every decision, particularly things that are politically charged or something like that. So you have to be able to blend your style as a team leader and recognize the times that you need to help versus the times that you need to lead. And there's a third time, sometimes you just need to give them a hug and recognize they're going through something tough, and there's nothing you can do other than give them that care and feeding to help them through that time. So you want to build that culture where teams, they collectively challenge each other. They're providing feedback. They hold rising standards. You're holding them to those standards. You're helping them meet them. And then at the times that they need a leader to step in and make a decision, you need to be able to step in and make that decision for them. The third piece in this framework came down to the talent itself. And it's how do you grow that talent? How do you help them be successful in their endeavors? And for me, there was a lot of things in here. There was one takeaway, something I think about a lot, is how do I keep growing my talent pipeline? You always need a healthy pipeline from people early in their career to people who are in the middle of their career. Maybe they've moved into management, they've moved into leadership. It could be technical leadership. They could be, principal architects or enterprise architects. You don't have to lead people to be a leader. You just have to be in a position where you are impacting large swaths of engineering or a department or the organization. And the way that you go about that, the way that you equip yourself to do that, is by opening the aperture, letting more light in, getting the perspective of the organization as a whole, that not just your department, not just the ones that you work with on a day-to-day basis, but when you think about your company as a whole, what is the objective? What is the outcome you're going for? What's the right thing for the customer? And to understand that, you need to be bringing your people along. When you're trying to grow individuals into the next set of leaders, you need to expose them to decision-making processes and, for better or for worse, meetings that are 1 to 3 levels above where they are today. So much of engagement is driven by whether people understand the vision of your department, the vision of your organization, and how they contribute to it. And if they just see decisions trickling down or mandates trickling down and they don't understand the why or how those decisions were made, they're going to be less engaged. They're going to be less, or I guess they'll be reluctant to latch on to them and drive them. But if you can expose them to that decision making and expose them to, things that are, above their, where they sit, they'll start to get that broader perspective of where things are going and why, and they'll be able to contribute even more. When they get individual decisions, they know, okay, our goal is a omni-channel experience for our customers. So if I didn't know that, maybe I would code this one way, or I would design this, one particular way. But now that I know, hey, it needs to work for voice, it needs to work for people with accessibility challenges and things like that. Okay, I'm going to design this a little bit differently so it gets that consistent reuse across all those channels. So again, super powerful framework: talent, team, routine. What are the moments that matter within each of these realms where you can level up your talent regardless of their background, build their knowledge, build their skills, and really raise the bar on the next level of outcomes that they can produce. So the next piece in this, it was a HBR management tip of the day, and it was about building super teams, and it was just a really brief tip, and it was all about learning velocity. So you've built this team, you're exposing them to decisions 1 to 3 levels above where they're at. You are leaning in to those moments that matter and ensuring that your standards are playing out day to day. They're not just a piece of paper that people point to. How do you then really accelerate things, particularly now in a time where we're going through just rapid change? And the tip, it was 3 simple things, right? Number 1 is run more experiments. You need to do things, explore things, to be willing to fail at those things, so long as you actually learn from those things. And if you don't keep trying new approaches, even when things are working, you're going to end up in a position where people stop testing, they stop improving, and you are stuck with the way things have always been done. So I think it's incumbent on us as engineering leaders and organizational leaders to create that space to run experiments. A simple way to do this, if you're a delivery manager or director, you're close to the day-to-day production of software assets, is if you follow the scale agile model, sprint 6 within a program increment is inspect and adapt. So on a quarterly basis, you could use that sprint to run some experiments, bring AI in, bring agentic AI in, try out a new technology that AWS has exposed. Try something new, learn from it. It doesn't have to succeed for it to be successful. And that's counterintuitive. But if you try something out and you learn something from it, that's a good day. That helps your team grow. That feeds into that second piece of the tip, which is to make curiosity contagious. Personally, I set a goal across my department for every individual in every role to utilize AI in their job function on a daily basis. And alone, that's not good enough. That's one of those check the box activities. So I sharpened the pencil further to say, share what you're doing, share how you're using it. How a business analyst uses it is going to be different than how a test engineer or a DevOps engineer or a security operations engineer is going to use these tools. And if they share their experiences with one another, that raises the tide for everyone, because not everyone's gonna figure it out the same way. Not everyone's gonna find the same cheat codes. And if you can find and surface those cheat codes across your organization, you're going to accelerate learning. And you need to reward it when that happens. And you need to reward when it doesn't. If somebody tries something and it doesn't pan out, hey, I still think spotlight them, acknowledge that they tried, acknowledge what they learned. You got to make curiosity contagious in order to have it spread and really raise that tide across all boats and just make it be known it's safe, right? The third piece of this tip, ask what people are stuck on. Again, pretty straightforward. If you're directly leading a like a scrum team, you got your daily stand-up. What'd you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? What's in your way? Number 3 right there. What are they stuck on? And you need to, well, I'll say that works at the scrum team level. As you move up an organization, you get in director roles, officer roles, you get to be a VP. People don't want to show you the dirty side of things. They don't want to show you the sausage making. You end up with these polished status updates that don't necessarily show what the real obstacle is. When people put a PowerPoint together that's going to a VP or a senior leader in an organization, a lot of context gets lost. You end up with a soundbite, and something that's amber may really be red. Something that's green may really be amber. People put too much polish on it, and you lose the context. You lose what the real problem is. And as leaders, we have got to take the time to normalize challenges. We've got to encourage honesty. And we need to turn individual problems into shared ones. In the last episode, I talked a little bit about, there's too much undersharing going on, and we need to pivot and turn more toward oversharing information, because when you share what's going on, it helps people identify patterns, helps identify commonality in problems, and it helps bring resources to bear to either swarm on a problem and solve it, or to say, hey, that's not really a problem, or it's a very low priority problem. Let's shift and think about something else. Our status culture, it just rewards polish over honesty. And when you lean into these PowerPoints and these polished status updates, you're selecting a channel that is already filtered out all the signal that you need. You've got to optimize for learning fast. You've got to build a system that surfaces failures, surfaces obstacles, and isn't rewarding, the polished 100-page PowerPoint. All right, shifting gears just a little bit. I mentioned there's a lot of articles in Harvard Business Review here lately that struck a chord. This one was titled "LLMs Are Manipulating Users with Rhetorical Tricks." And just the title drew me in. It was a really interesting read. And frankly, it's something I have personally experienced as I've used OpenAI's tools and Claude and even my own things I've got here going on the side. The core finding in this article, and it leaned on some research from Boston Consulting Group consultants. The core finding across several hundred of these consultants was that when they ask an LLM to check back on something, so they pushed back on a finding or a statement, the LLM did not reconsider. It might apologize warmly. It might say, "Oh, you're right to question this," but then it went through and it just added a bunch of comparisons and ultimately arrived at the same conclusion. And it was wrapped in what one of the Harvard Business School doctoral candidates called an impenetrable fortress of data and rhetoric. What is this doing for us? For me, it reinforced what I've talked about for the last 15 minutes on this show, and something that I'm espousing every time someone asks me the question. And it is that the human in the loop is the foundational promise of responsible AI deployment. Every AI governance framework relies on it. You cannot just turn a function loose with agentic AI and not have a human that can interrogate it, question it, and ultimately validate the outputs that it is producing. AI is incentivized to win an argument with you, not to be right. So when you're sitting in my seat, leading a large organization, maybe you're in a regulated environment, you're in an environment where the wrong decision from a model isn't just embarrassing, but it's a liability. This isn't a theoretical concern. You've got to have those humans in the loop. It goes back to the first segment. What are the moments that matter? Where do you need to have them lean in, check the output against an independent source, and then have them build that into your system so that when the model is making decisions, you can have confidence in the reliability and the output. The human in the loop only works if the human hasn't already been talked out of it. So let's tie these couple of segments together. They're really about the same thing. Whether it's people or AI, excellence does not happen by accident. It's a design problem. You have to build the systems and identify what are the high stakes moments, what are your standards, and are your standards actually being held in practice during those moments? And this AI revolution, it's making all of that harder to see because now part of that system is arguing back with you. Now, before I go, I want to plant a seed for the next episode. Everything we just talked about is about building systems, building them with intention, identifying high stakes moments, holding those standards. There's a version of this where this goes wrong. There's a number of research articles recently produced that show that AI is now just blasting, I'll call it vulnerabilities at scale. AI generated code, vibe coded software, it's shipping critical vulnerabilities, high blast radius, industrial scale. The same bugs, they're propagating across thousands of repositories. And we need to have people looking at our open source software, looking at the repositories that our AI is finding on its own and incorporating into our code bases, and ensuring that we are okay with that. We got to review AI as if it's a junior developer, and we've got to interrogate that pull request. That's back to that Fulton and Warner article at the top of the show. That's the high stakes moment. Somebody just shipped it. So next episode, what does accountability look like when AI is your team and it's shipping vulnerabilities at scale? How do we build the tools and equip our people to find them? That's our next episode. I'll see you then. And hey, if this episode was useful, subscribe wherever you listen. Share it with a colleague you think could benefit from it. That's the best way to help the show grow. If you have a question or a topic you'd like me to dig into, or you think someone would be a great guest to have on, send it to Quinn. She's my producer. You can reach her at producer@ctounfiltered.fm. We read everything. I'm Mike Schubert. This is CTO Unfiltered. I'll see you next time.